put up instead of OAA sometime?
Yes, I will add that in there as soon as this goes through. Looks like it's about to go live now.
Okay, great.
All right, we are live.
Hey, everybody, it's Tony Caldwell. I'm here with a great group of insurance professionals from all over the country to address the question coming out of COVID, or at least coming out of this part of COVID as we return to the new normal. Where do we go from here as insurance agency owners? What do we do to make sure that we profit during this time that's very unique in the history of the world, not to mention the history of our country? So let me quickly introduce our great group of folks. We've got with us today Kristen Garlow with Mountain States Agency Alliance, Holly Heron with Assure Alliance, Jack Herkvik with SIAA of Northern Ohio, Tony Vitetto with the TAG Agency Alliance out in California, Dave Rice with Michigan Agency Partners, and Eric Blue with Pennsylvania Insurance Alliance. And again, I'm Tony Caldwell with One Agents Alliance. So we've got a group of people from literally all over the country, and we want to talk today among ourselves, and hopefully you're going to enjoy eavesdropping about where do we go from here in terms of maximizing personal lines revenue. And I'm going to introduce Kristen Garlow in a minute to kick us off. Before I do that, let me just say that there are about 800 retail insurance agencies and almost $1.5 billion of premium represented by this group of folks. And while we as a group don't know everything, we're very, very blessed because we learn from the best in the business. We've got literally hundreds of outstanding insurance agents. And so what we want to do today is curate for you some best practice ideas about how you can make more money through the balance of 2020 by maximizing your opportunities in personal insurance. To do that, we're going to talk about telematics and why it really matters now. We're then going to talk about attracting high value clients. And we're not talking about rich people here. We're talking about people who make your agency a lot of money. Following that, we're going to talk about how to make service easier and cheaper, which is really important in maximizing agency profits in a time in which challenges exist to revenue. And finally, we're going to talk about money to be made being a consultative agent and not a transaction-oriented agent. Yes, price is table stakes, but how do you go beyond that right now? We're going to talk about that. And before we start with Kristen, let me invite you to please give us your questions and your comments. Share your wisdom and expertise with us in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, just type it in. We see it in real time, and we'll bring you into the conversation. So with that, let's get started. Kristen, talk to us for just a few minutes about telematics. It's a big buzzword in the industry for the last decade or so, but independent agents aren't using it the way direct writers are. Why is that?
Well, so first off, telematics is usually a device or an app on your phone that is used to monitor your driving behavior for a specific amount of time. And that typically correlates into a discount on your insurance policy. And then pay by mile is an ongoing monitoring of your driving usage and adjust your premiums up or down based on that. The captives and direct writers have been using it for their clients much longer than the independent agency has. And now our company provider partners are now providing it to our consumers to use. So we're just a little bit behind as far as the ability to provide it to our clients, but we're catching up quickly.
Okay. I know that when carriers come into our office and talk to us about it, we find that there's a lot of agents that are really reluctant to use it. And we know that it's not necessarily the consumer that's reluctant because the captive carriers are adopting this. Their customers are adopting it.
Right.
Why do you think agents on our side of the business are so reluctant to ask their customers to try it out?
Well, when it first launched, the telematics device was a small apparatus you plugged into your vehicle. And we ran into a bunch of problems at that time. So the telematics device was draining the batteries of the vehicles. And actually here in our own office, we had one of our producers try it out on her vehicle and it drained the battery twice. So that wasn't starting things off on the right foot. And then in more rural areas, there was several instances that we experienced personally where that telematics device wasn't able to connect to a cellular signal to get a correct reading on it. So when frontline CSR workers run into issues like that, it makes them very hesitant to promote it to their clients because of the hassle they could receive on the back end.
Okay, but right now, every family in America has either lost a job or is afraid of possibly losing a job.
Right.
Certainly, everybody is concerned about their personal income and their expenses, and insurance is one of the big household budget items. So, can telematics save consumers money on their premiums right now, or is it something they have to wait a while to get?
Well, for sure. So for telematics, it's something that it used to be something you started at the beginning of your policy, but now agents across the country can offer it at renewal or even midterm with a lot of our partner carriers. And it's a great way to allow your driving behavior to promote a discount to your policy. And most companies are providing a discount just for participating in those programs. So we've really been encouraging our agents to not be scared of it anymore. All of it is app-based at this stage of the game. People aren't using those small devices as much as they used to, and really pushing it to the forefront because it improves retention and allows your client to have that feel-good feeling that their positive driving habits are turning into discounts on their policies.
Okay. So have you heard of anybody who said, I tried it, nobody wanted it. And so, been there, done that, have the merit badge, don't want to do it
Yeah,
again?
we've heard a lot of CSRs that have said that clients felt like telematics was Big Brother watching them as they drive their vehicle. And so, and then we respect everyone's right to privacy in today's day and age. But as more people are becoming used to these type of languages we're using with the clients about telematics and digital presence within their insurance space, it's got a lot easier, and we just have to keep after it.
Okay. Well, certainly, nobody heard of COVID in January, right? Or very few people
Right.
had, or certainly not in December. So the world's changed.
Mm-hmm.
So attitudes you had a year ago probably need to be rethought, right? Any idea? Kind of what does the discount range look like from where you sit for premiums?
Well, typically the discount just to participate, we most commonly see is 5% up to 30%. The average discount with our largest partner carrier is 13% here in West Virginia. So it's a great discount that you can use for your clients, and it's an even better opportunity for renewal savings. So someone calls to you and their budget has changed and they're looking for ways to kind of maximize their coverage and still keep that lower rate without changing their coverage. It's a great saving tool for renewal retention.
Okay. You just said something that kind of struck. I've been accused of driving fast before, and unfortunately, I've been accused about driving fast by police officers. And
Right.
yeah. So my premium runs a couple $1,000s on my car, and you just told me I could save $300 potentially if I put telematics on there, and
Right.
and maybe got off the gas pedal a little bit. So. But I'm thinking if I had an agent and I could save $300 right now on my insurance and they didn't tell me about it, I'd be irritated.
Right. And, it allows our company partners to really assess the risk they're looking at. If someone is a hard breaker and a fast accelerator, then they need to collect a premium that reflects that, right? However, it's also a really unique way to show your clients that their driving behavior is important for not only their safety, but for how we assess their premium on their policy.
Okay. Hey, we've got a comment here from Mitch Brown on Facebook, and he says, I love it with Safeco. I can see all my kids' driving habits, and they know to keep my discount high. So just for the group, anybody have any great stories about how people have really appreciated having this technology on their policy?
Well, I don't want to jump in, but I will say I had one of our clients tell me that they had a teenage driver that was somewhat reluctant to listen to the parents' advice about speeding up so quickly and hard braking. And whenever you sign up for the telematics program with almost all partner carriers now, they give you access to a website where you can have those conversations with your teenage driver or young driver. That is reflective to, it's going to cost me more if these behavior changes don't happen.
Okay, that's great. Hey, we've got a comment here from April Jones on Facebook. She said, for companies that do it's a question, for companies that do surcharge for driving habits, how do you overcome objections from consumers? I think many consumers or customers are willing if it's an automatic discount, but carriers like Progressive and Travelers, where the data can hurt the client, it's often harder to sell. So thoughts about that?
Mhm.
I'll comment on being in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. We're in an urban area, a lot of stop starts, fast accelerations. The telematics absolutely, as April was saying, it will reflect on that type of driving. It's unfortunately unavoidable no matter how hard you try. The good news is the insurance companies will still give you a minimum discount, usually at least 5% just for participating. And that's where you have to really talk to the consumer and educate them on and at least getting that basic discount. And hopefully as driving improves, they'll see more.
Hey, Eric, quick question. I mean, if you're only getting a 5% discount, that doesn't move the needle for some people. I mean, it might now with COVID going on, but can you go back and ask for more? Is that possible?
Absolutely. If your driving habits improve, at least the way they're measuring them in the urban area, yes, you will see an improvement. But at least you always know you have that 5%. The other thing is I think we have to look at the trends of the insurance industry. They're going to force the public into this. If you want use-based rates, you're going to need telematics.
Okay. And I want to talk about that. I know Kristen has some comments on that topic in just a second. Before we get there though, Jack, you had a thought you wanted to share.
Yeah, so it's funny. I had 3 conversations with different higher level executives at insurance companies over the course of a week, and it's always interesting when people of different positions from different companies say the same thing, and they all kept saying, God, if we had usage based or even more telematics in place when COVID hit, it would have saved us a ton of money. I mean, the amount of money they spent just processing all those discounts was an insane number to those insurance companies. Yeah. So I think that it's one of those things where they're fast tracking all of these devices as a result of what happened in COVID. It's top on their to-do list right now.
Okay. Hey, we've got another comment. I'm sorry, Jack. Did I cut you off? Didn't mean to.
Just real quick to answer April's question. One of the ways that we tackle that, we work hard to get the statistics of what the average discount that somebody's getting. So like with Travelers, we kind of will reach out to our rep and say, hey, in Ohio, I know they might be able to go, the rate might go up, but on average, we're saving 13%. And I think that number kind of helps set some people at ease when they know, more often than not, people are getting a discount. And if I don't,
yeah, I'm getting a $300 discount. I'm pretty happy about that. I'm going to come back to Kristen in just a second because I'd like her to talk to us a little bit about pay per mile. Before I do that, though, we've got a couple other comments. My friend Tim Davis from Missouri, who is an outstanding insurance agent, they've got a nice agency there in the St. Louis area, says with low driving habits, he's talking about no one's driving much, right? Driving less. It's the best time ever to use telematics. They've had several clients really maximizing discounts. It's improving their retention, but also their customer loyalty, which is really important in a time in which consumers, frankly, they don't care how much they love you. It's about the money, right? They've got to save the money. And then Steven Silver says on YouTube, he said that Liberty Mutual's got a Highway Hero free app that's not connected to auto insurance. So apparently you can use that to try telematics yourself, maybe with your teenager, to see about her or his braking and acceleration habits, or just get comfortable with the idea. That'd be a great suggestion to offer customers or clients who are reluctant to try it. Hey, get the Highway Hero app. Doesn't matter if you're with Liberty or not, and see that you're not going to get yourself in trouble, right? I think I might want to do that. Anyway, Kristen, one of the things that's happening now increasingly is that carriers are starting to talk about paying per mile. Not really here yet, but it's coming. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when it comes to pay by mile, the biggest thought that I would want people to have on their minds right now is that it is the logical next step for telematics and digital presence in the insurance world. So, with urban lifestyles, ride sharing, and working from home increasing at such a large percentage, it's the next most likely step for insurance pricing. And it allows the client to understand that their budget can be based around their usage, which makes sense to a lot of consumers today. So as we become more familiar with the telematics version of things, make sure that you are constantly on the front line of learning more about which of your company partners are going to be providing the pay by mile segments, because it will be a game changer whenever it really catches on across the country.
So is there any evidence that consumers want pay by mile?
Yeah, I think so. When we speak with our company partners, it's something that is on the fast track from a technical perspective on the company side. And they know that the companies need to be meeting the needs of the consumer, and they're not driving as much. Ride sharing has become so significant in the last few years, and now working from home is something we're all doing. So, make sure that your CSRs and producers are familiar with whatever the information is around pay by mile whenever it comes to your agency, and really don't let them be afraid of it, because we could miss out on some great opportunity for new business.
Okay. Hey, that's great. Anybody else have any last thoughts or last comments on telematics or pay by mile? Anybody online? And by the way, thanks for your questions. Keep them coming. And if not, once we are done with that, we're going to switch gears and go to, I've had too much tea this afternoon, attracting high value clients.
Hey, Tony, can I say something real quick? Here in California, annual mileage is a top 3 rating variable. So it is a dramatic impact on the rate. And, with COVID, we had a number of carriers giving premium rebates and things like that. If you just think, to Jack's point about the intensity of work that the carriers had to do and that agents had to do in dealing with all the calls and questions, really when mileage, what it comes down to is accurate mileage, accurate rate for risk. It's that simple. So telematics and pay by mile open up a lot of efficiency for the agency and for the carrier and for the client to get that accuracy where you're not constantly revisiting and touching mileage. It's one of the biggest pain points, at least for us here in California. Just want to throw that out there.
No, I appreciate you doing that. And so as we switch gears, I think the main thing I'm hearing here is that it's not just the future, it's really now. And we're kind of behind on the independent agency channel. I'm hearing that, but I'm also hearing that there's significant money, $300 a year for me, to be saved. And that, right now when people are sensitive about what they're paying and thinking about shopping their insurance, I think shopping behavior is going to increase dramatically the rest of 2020 and into 2021. If you're not doing those kinds of things for your clients, at least giving them the option, you probably have a problem. I know I tell clients all the time, look, you're a smart person. You're going to make great decisions. My job is to give you information. So I always like giving everybody a smorgasbord of choices, letting them decide. So I think that's more important than ever. Well, let's switch gears real quick, and let's talk about making more money with insurance clients. And so there's a lot of talk around the industry the last couple of years about high value, meaning rich people, right? That you can insure in your agency, or the mass affluent. But there's a whole nother way to look at value for a client in an agency. And I think it's significant because, the average agency on our side of the business in the independent agency channel in personal insurance sells 1.6 policies per customer. The average State Farm or Farmers agent selling 3 to 5. So Eric, tell us a little bit about what is a high value client? What does that mean to us? What should it mean to us?
Well, Tony, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the whole concept of why we need to think about the high value client. Because the pandemic, COVID-19 is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on agency revenues. The independent agent really needs to improve productivity in order to increase profitability. So they need to focus on running their business correctly as this market changes. So we talked about the whole concept of the changing in the pricing structure. Well, as those prices more than likely go down, so does the income. It's an equal percentage. So the agent really needs to focus in on the right customer, the right prospect, to be as efficient as possible.
So what is the right prospect?
Well, the right prospect, it's interesting, I think, the way many of the insurance companies look at the prospects of a high valued client. And as you had mentioned, over the years, some have called it mass affluent, some have called it high net worth. For the independent agent, for the average agent, we know better. It's everyone out there who really wants to work with the agent in designing the right product for their needs and wants. It's really those people who want to be collaborative, as we'll be talking about that in the next session about the whole idea of a collaborative environment. So it's really identifying those agents who want to work with people who want to develop a relationship. I think that's one of the most critical aspects of it, developing a relationship.
So why do you think agents are willing to settle for one only selling part of somebody's insurance and letting another agent or two sell the rest of it? I mean, what motivates an agent to take that approach? It didn't used to always, in my experience, it didn't used to be that way. It seems like that's a trend over the last few years that's really developed. What's changed, and why do people think that that's a good idea?
Well, it has changed in the sense that I think people are willing to unbundle their insurance, that they're willing to shop more frequently for price. And the agents have gotten away from high touch. And as we all know, high tech does not need to be low touch. High tech really should be high touch. The relationship needs to be developed with the customer. You need to stay in contact. You need to mix it up with the customer and to give them multiple ways of working with the agency and the agency staff to develop that relationship. I keep coming back to the concept of relationship. It's just incredibly important. Agents got away from it. They desperately need to get back to it.
So Eric, you run a pretty good sized agency there in, as you said, in the Philadelphia area. You got producers, you sell a lot of personal insurance in your agency. What do you think is the right number of touches in a year for an agent to be having with a personal insurance client?
I think you need to look at touches by tech. In other words, email, social media. You also need to look at personal touch, the phone call. So an annual phone call to the customer to discuss their needs and wants is critical. The call to a customer when they have something happen, good or bad. You read about in the paper, somebody got a promotion, give them a call. The high touch is incredibly important. It's again, relationship. They have a claim, definitely give them a call. Stay in touch, help them out, be a resource.
Eric, I had a flood loss at my house a couple of years ago. It was devastating. It was really, really educational because I didn't realize how emotionally devastating that was going to be. It was a big pain in the neck, right? And my agent's actually on YouTube with us right now, and he did an awesome job of marshaling resources. We were out of town, took wonderful care of us in the early days of our claim. But one thing I noted was that, as time went on, when really not depression, but, really frustration, all the things, the carrier did a great job. Didn't hear so much from the agent. So, and I'm not criticizing him. I just think, that's not part of our process. Do you have a particular magic that you use? I know it's a little off topic, but I'm curious. You mentioned claims. How many times should we be talking to people during a claim?
Well, it's interesting in the sense that as an agent, as pertains to errors and omissions, and here we are during this COVID-19 crisis, and we could all talk about business clients and business interruption and how our E&O carriers tell us remain neutral. But it doesn't mean you have to remain silent. And that was the key lesson. Our agency 2 years ago, we really looked at this issue and we said, we're missing something. And we started mailing postcards out to every claim, every person involved in a claim to just get in touch and say, we're here to help you. And then we followed up with a phone call. And then after the claim was settled, we followed up once more to see what their satisfaction level was and if there are any changes that need to be made. So just through that experience, we saw a retention increase of 2 to 3 points. So it paid many dividends by working closely with our personal lines clients in claims.
That's huge. Thanks for that. I know it was a little off topic, but I appreciate you sharing it. I know Holly had a comment. She had an example she wanted to give us. Holly? Or did I miss?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I think when we talk about high value client, one thing I just wanted to bring up is a high value client in a rural area, the home coverage could be, 180,000 to 220,000, multiple cars, somebody who really cares about securing their assets. They could have, four-wheelers, some toys. It's not, and I think we're saying relationships and those things, but high value doesn't necessarily mean, $1 million+ home. It's really about like the relationship, the total package, selling the whole insurance relationship.
Thanks for that. I've just noticed that when somebody from the South says assets, it turns into an interesting word. So we've got a great comment here from an industry consultant John Fear. For those of you who know John, he does great work with agencies all over the country on maximizing their revenue, helping them with efficiencies, learning to sell more business. Really one of the smartest people that I've ever met in terms of agency operations, former VP with Travelers Insurance. So anyway, John, I'm buttering your bread, I know, but I think your point that you've made is great. And what John says is, in a price sensitive time, and boy, if there was ever a price sensitive time, we're in it today. Account rounding and cross-selling clients is a trifecta of increasing retention, revenue, and close rates. So what I think is interesting, and John, if you have further thoughts on that, shoot them back. But his last point, which I get retention increases and I understand revenue increases. I think it's really interesting what he's saying about increasing close rates. So when you do account rounding, you actually sell more policies to somebody, you actually increase your close rate. Can anybody share some examples or thoughts about that?
I'll throw something out there, Tony. It's
Go ahead, Tony.
Not specifically on the close rate, but it is in that vein. There's a great little book that I read. It's called Checkmate, and it's more geared around life and some other side products, but the same principle applies. And it goes to what Eric was saying about relationship, but it's all how you start the setup of the conversation. If you think of a chessboard, that's the entire analogy of the book, that your opening move sets up the exact rest of the sale. And so if you take the auto only lead, the home only lead, even if they're, like Holly said, working professional, 200,000 household income, but they call you because their auto went up. If you don't set that chessboard up on that first call and first transaction and create the know, like, and trust, you will not be effective in giving yourself options when you're trying to get to John's point of the close rate improving. So Checkmate's that little book. I just thought I'd throw that out there, but it's a simple thing, great thing.
Appreciate that. And we'll put that on our resources page, which we'll talk about towards the end of today, just so you'll have that if you're not able to take notes. John also makes a point that really is a great segue to a question I want to ask Eric, which is that, it's a great time right now to go back after the lost clients, maybe who left due to a lower price in the past, because obviously whatever lower price they left for, it's gone up again, right? And maybe their current client or current agent rather is asleep. So Eric, talk to us about the agency automation system and how to, what its value is in terms of maximizing the high value client, and maybe going after lost business is one of those ways.
Agency management systems, number one, if you don't have it, get it. If you do have it, learn how to use it. That's really, really critical. We're not using it well enough as an independent agent. We need to use it more because we can measure the number of policies, the PIF counts, as we call them. We can measure the activity level on the account. We can begin to understand the cross-sell opportunities, not in just adding accounts, but even cross-sell with small commercial. So there are numerous ways that the agency management system can function in sales support if you use it correctly. So learn your agency management system.
So you just said, learning to use it effectively and all that kind of stuff. And, that kind of makes my head spin a bit. I remember many years ago, we got trained on our new AMS 360 system when it first came out. And I went to my partner's office and said, I'm never going to log into that thing ever again in my life. It was a mind blower, right? I mean, and I got over that. But a lot of you guys are working with agents every day, helping them master some of this kinds of stuff. So what are some of the ways that you've found in your organizations to help agents really make that a tool that's useful? Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Well, I'd like to take that a little bit, Tony, and mention during this time, it seems that it's come to a head that data is king. And it's so very important for every agency to have the data, understand how their clients want to be communicated with, updating client files, updating email addresses. All of these things are so very important. I've seen agencies over the previous couple of months that have excelled, or some that are scrambling because their data was so old and not updated, and they weren't sure how to communicate with their clients, how to communicate, and in what fashion. So, and I did want to comment on Eric and echo a little bit on the claims piece. That's when we shine. That's when we really prove ourselves. We can talk all we want, but staying involved in that claims process, being that guided, that counselor, being that shoulder to rest on, so to speak, answer the questions. It's so very critical. And then following up and measuring and monitoring and increasing your capabilities and assistance.
Mhm.
Thanks, Dave. Hey, Jeff.
Let me add just a quick note, if I may, on
you bet.
just a quick note on agency management systems. One of the ways I encourage the independent agent to think about the agency management system is thinking as a tool that will allow you to profile your customer, to truly understand what makes up that customer and what are their attributes that you can then use to make sure you're attracting them to talk to you about the right type of products.
Okay.
Use it as a profile tool.
Hey, Eric, I have another question for you, and I was going to ask it, but Jeff in Virginia is also asking it on YouTube, which is, how do you go about really attracting high value clients? So if a high value client's somebody that's going to put their trust in you and let you sell them all their insurance, and if that's a unique person today, how do you find them? How do you get them? How do you get them to come to you?
Well, trust is the key word. And how do you build trust? And with many people, the high value client, it's education. You're reaching out to them, be it through social media, be it through direct mail campaigns, be it through your network of professional, be it realtors or lawyers or accountants, whatever network you've created to help generate leads. Ultimately, you need to get them educated that they can trust you. And you do that just through constant contact.
So there's a lot of technology that you can use for that today. And there's this thing called content marketing. It's the idea that you put information into the world and people that are looking for it will find it. Anybody have any examples of using that kind of marketing to bring in high value clients to an agency? I'm seeing some head shaking. I'd love to have a comment before we move on.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that a little bit. I have an agency. I think some of you probably heard Forge 3, I think is what it's called, has a clickable coverage. And one of my agents has all these, you'll see a picture of like a home with a pool and a trampoline and all these things in a car. And what he does is he'll send out informational pieces like Eric was mentioning, and he links it back to those clickable coverages in his website. And so when you go on that, it has all the little exposures in yellow. And when you click on them, it tells you, hey, this is why you need this additional, coverage. It's not on the standard form. So that's another, I think, thing when he was talking about, communication, and it's about education. that's a great way to get them to actually go back and look at their policies and see, oh my gosh, am I covered for the, shed that I have out back?
Great. Anybody else have an idea? Jack?
Yeah, I'll just share an interesting story. So we were looking at storing some wine in the house, and we were kind of Googling some things, hey, what kind of temperatures are best, all that fun stuff. And I was amazed that the second article that came up on Google was a blog that an insurance agent had wrote about a wine schedule. And I was like, man, what powerful, material that is when somebody just does a random Google search and, that insurance agency's coming up at the top. It wasn't even somebody within, 1,000 miles of where I live. And they came up in the top just by putting out good blog content about a very particular subject.
Jack, you said something just now that I think is really, really important that everybody understand, which is geography is dead. We're all on Zoom today, and we've got people literally all over the country participating in this call, whether they're on the chat side or whether they're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook. So, and you got a blog from a guy 1,000 miles away who all he had to do was spend $50, get a license in Ohio, sell you your insurance to you, right? So, one of the things I think that agents really need to think about is that, because it means that guy is competing with you in Ohio, okay? And if you're not competing with him wherever he happens to be, you're missing the opportunity, number one, okay? But you're also under threat, number two, right? So, because geography is dead. But the other thing is interesting is I think that you have to go really narrow in a niche. I mean, you have the ability to go narrower than ever before profitably because you can go wider in geography, right? So you can sell the wine aficionados in all 50 states being wide, but to wine aficionados being really deep. And if you think about that, that gives you an awesome opportunity to develop a high value client. Just as an example, I mean, I'm sure that people that are drinking a lot of wine, looking for it online, are buying lots of insurance because they have a lot of stuff, right? They have a collection, for example.
Hey, Tony.
Yeah. Anyway.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in. I just want to say one quick thing. If you want to fish for sharks, you don't go fishing in the lake, right? So to your point about finding your niche, I think of one of our great members. She's an equestrian, loves riding horses, and people who own horses own houses and own businesses and things like that. Some would be high income, some are upper middle income. But the bottom line is she's found her niche within that community of people that share a common passion. And that goes back to Jack's point of, hey, I see this guy who's got a little kind of target on the wine segment. Those are proxies for people that have assets at risk and who you can kind of create the common bonds like Eric was talking about, establishing trust being the key thing, so.
Well, and
Jack, next week when we're together, I'm sorry, Dave.
No,
I was gonna say next week when we're together, Jack, let us know how many emails you get from agents around the country. I'm just going to be curious. And Dave, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, to that point, because those folks hang around with other people that are like them, and do something different. Be different. Don't do the same thing as everyone else. We have some folks that work with these affluent, mass affluent, whatever we want to call that. They make personal house calls. They're doing an inventory checklist and doing walkthroughs in the homes, in the barns, in the stables, doing checklists, doing something different. Obviously, you have to watch your amount of time spent versus income, right? We have to do this and make sense of it. And then the other thing, we have some that even go in and videotape after their clients and keep videotapes of certain belongings, jewelry, art, things of that, and just doing something different. And they will talk to their friends. If you don't think they're going to be having a glass of wine, speaking of wine, if they're not be having a glass of wine with their friends and say, hey, can you believe that Dave came by and walked through the stables and walked through the home and videoed everything, gave me a copy of it, kept it on the flash drive? Be different.
So John, Fear Again on YouTube says, coordinate or collaborate with financial planners. They've got the insurance information for their clients. And usually those folks are the kinds of people that agents want to attract. So it's another great suggestion. We're going to have to move on from this because we don't want to. We want to talk about a couple other things today. The other thing we want to just really touch on for a few minutes is really making it easy for your clients to get service. And when I think about easy for them, I also think about cheap for you. I think about that doing two things. One is it makes them want to do business with you and stay with you, but it also means you can cut your expenses, which are really important today. And so, Holly, I know you've got some thoughts on that. And I know you want to talk for a couple of minutes just about service centers as a way to automate some service. So what were you thinking about today?
Yeah, so I had just sat on actually one of our national carriers had, done some surveys based on, the beginning of COVID and kind of where we are now. And what they're seeing is they're seeing a 46% increase in insureds that want to self-service options. So, we've always talked about service centers. Service centers are not what they were 6 years ago. The type of data that you can get on a monthly basis from most of the national carriers is quite detailed. It'll let you know, how many times these clients are calling, how long they're on the phone, what they need. And for most of the service centers right now, they're offering either, zero service center fee for the next several months. Through, our relationships, we have some discounted ones where it's 1 to 1.25%. But the most is usually up to 2%. And for those of you that, staff versus, servicing options, it's something you really want to consider.
Hey, Holly, you just said something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, because you talked about, what it costs for a service center instead of how much it saves.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think about 1.5%, that's roughly 10% of your commission, right? So all the benchmark studies show that to provide service in a personal insurance agency costs about 25% of revenue. So what you just said to me was, well, I can provide service for 40% of what I've been spending, which means I have more money for marketing, development, sales, right? Plus maybe better service. I think insurance companies market it the way you brought it up, which I think is bass-ackwards and wrong. So I just wanted to say that. So anyway, it's
well, I didn't mean to. Yeah, I did talk about the cost piece of it. And you're right. I've worked with several agents that, they were contemplating bringing somebody on, paying 40 grand, maybe some expenses. And in several scenarios, when we ran the statistics, they were paying less than 15 grand in a service center fee and better service because they're all actually cross-selling and they're incentivized to cross-sell. So that's a good point.
So with us specifically, we decided to go with service centers because it allowed us to advertise that we were a 24/7 agency, very much like our competitors. So when I looked at the cost and then what I would get in return, it was really a no-brainer.
So it's not that's a good State Farm. It's Kristen from MSA.
And that's a great point, Kristen. I've seen agents that want to keep service in-house, right? They're afraid of the service center, but yet, and then they close at 5. So they'll hire an after-hours company that has no clue what insurance means, and they get a claim or a call in the middle, later in the evening, and they fumble it around, and it ends up being a horrible experience. While they're trying to save that 1.5%, which is nothing, they end up losing the opportunity to be a hero at the time when they're needed most, when a claim happens after hours.
Hey, can I change thank you for the information on service centers, and I think that's valuable, but I think there's a couple other things that we ought to touch on in terms of making service easier. Holly, I know you have some thoughts around informational tools to attract new clients. And so again, finding more revenue is critical to everybody watching today. So what were the tools you were thinking are so great?
Yeah, one thing I would say too is carriers are learning that they have to be more nimble. So you're seeing a lot of the carriers, kind of like the telematics, they're stepping up with apps. For me, if you're bundled all with one carrier, push the carrier app instead of your own app. If you have mixed money, you could use apps. But as far as communication tools, this kind of goes back to what Eric was talking about as far as setting up kind of like a communication calendar. And it doesn't always have to be a phone call or a personal touch. You can do those through automation and it still feels personal. One of the things I would say is, integration of your phone or your communication system in a workflow. I have a couple examples I will put out on the COVID page for the resource page, but there's several. The Bridge by the Cotter Group has a good communication workflow that integrates technical touch points with physical touch points, as well as DYL and light speed voice. Those are a couple that would help keep you in contact with your clients on a regular basis.
That's great. You mentioned apps. There's a million apps in the world, but does it make sense for agents to either have their own app, or should they be promoting carrier apps, or should we just ignore the whole thing?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, I think in today's world, if you're using, I think the national carriers are kind of there. I think you have some regional carriers where, they may not still have a service center. And so apps are probably not on their design board for 2021. So that's where I do think you're going to want to have an app. Apps are so easy to use. I mean, listen, we all probably have, 15 million apps on our phone. If you look at all the surveys are telling carriers they want self-service options. And when they ask about what they want from their agent as well, self-service options, and what do they value the most from the agent? It's communication and information. So I think that's where you kind of have to make the decision. You might have to go both routes.
Okay. All right.
So I want to pop in on that because a lot of retail agencies do have their own agency app. And one great tip that has come in handy so many times with us is that when the client's in front of you and you're going through setting up their policy, ask them to download the app right then and make sure that they toggle over to accept push notifications. So in the event of any major catastrophe, especially weather-related ones, you have the ability to push out notifications to all of your clients who have enabled that feature with ways to communicate with you. So if we had a derecho go through here a few years ago, and a significant amount of the state was without power for over a week. So it was very hard to communicate with our clients. They couldn't get a hold of us. And so people were going to Facebook and Instagram and communicating with us in any way that they could. So that's just a quick tip that has really come in handy with us lately.
Kristen, you just brought up something that reminds me, clients don't always know what they're supposed to do. And so that's really about onboarding, when you sell somebody, right? We've discovered a fabulous tool, and we'll put this on the resource page too. It's called Playbook. And what Playbook lets you do is you can put any kind of resource you have, whether it's a website, whether a document in your agency, you can do videos, but you can, and it's so idiot proof. I've been able to use it. So, but you can put this thing together, and it's like, you can send it when you sell a policy to a client, and they can self-teach themselves how to do business with you. It's really powerful. And so, and it removes that confusion. So anyway, I'm going to move us along because we're going to be running out of time. And I do want to get to our fourth topic, which is the need to be a focus on consulting with people. I had a vice president from Travelers tell me a couple of years ago, and I was shocked to hear her say this because, I was shocked to hear her say it, but she said, price is table stakes. We know we've got to have the right price. And we know that as agents, right? You got to be price competitive. And that's never been more true than it is right now. Never. Because there's never probably in the history of the world. I read yesterday that the world economy hasn't been as scary looking as it is right now in 100 years. So, this thing is a long way from over. So people really care about what they're spending because they're scared, and it's going to be bad, and it's going to be bad for a long time, even though agents maybe haven't felt it yet. So with all that in mind, though, why is it important to still focus on being consultative and professional in your relationships? Jack, you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's a good transition. I think the topic that we were just talking about with service is a good transition. And I think it's a good thing to start with in that is when we kind of look at what service means now compared to what it meant, even 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, everything's so available. I mean, when we were talking about service, we were talking about 24/7. We're talking about apps. We're talking about self-service. And those transactional type tasks that we used to do, view as almost an important aspect of what we do, are becoming a little less important by the day. And I think that the Geicos and the Progressives of the world are really hoping that we as independent agents continue to focus solely on those types of tasks because they think they can beat us in that. And in their minds, kind of like you were saying, Tony, if it's about service and if it's only about price, they think they can beat us. But where we can beat them is on being a consultative agent and really making sure that our agents are hearing what we need to say. And being that local expert in your community is something that the Geicos and the Progressives of the world can never do. They're never going to be able to compete with us on that level. So I think making sure that you are, giving your staff the time to be consultative and giving them the knowledge that they need to be consultative is really the most important weapon that we as independent agents, have at our disposal right now.
So how do you make sure that so everybody's busy, right? And I think probably we've never been busier, in many ways. So how do you make sure your staff have the time to take the time to have those kinds of relationships?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think service centers that we just talked about is a good example. I think really also paying attention to, how much money you're making per client is a big one as well. I mean, when you start to look at how, especially on personal lines, how we're getting squeezed from a commission standpoint, you've got to have enough money to provide the level of service that you want your clients to have. It's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to give my client the cheapest because that's, what I would want them to have. But at that point, you might not have the money to give them the service that you need to give them. So I think paying attention to that and how many policies you have per customer really increase the amount of money that you can use to invest in that sort of thing.
Jack, you said something really important, which is the revenue per client. I tell people all the time, I think the most important thing to know in any business is something called spread. And spread is just the difference between revenue per client and then salaries or cost per client. Typically, in an agency, it's payroll and commission expense per client. So if you know those two numbers, the middle thing is really your marginal or gross profit, and you can benchmark those numbers through the benchmarking studies. But if you focus and pay attention on that every month and every quarter, and just focus on driving spread, it will get you to focus on not just revenue per client, but also what your costs are to service the account. And when you get really sensitized to that, I know we went through this experience many years ago in my agency, you begin to say, this is somebody that I don't want to write their insurance because I can't afford to write a $20 commission policy. So spread, look it up. It's a great tool for that.
Can I throw something out real quick?
Yeah.
I think, Tony, you hit on a really important point, and I think Eric mentioned this around management systems, and I think it's the intentionality of actually running a business, AKA your agency. And so often the desk level runs the ship, and that's not a problem. But if we're not working as a team with our employees and showing them the numbers and saying, hey guys, this is why it's important. This is what we want to do. Let's code this client a certain code, because maybe if they non-pay cancel for the 4th time, you have the authority to not rewrite them. Or in a consultative way, knowing those, like you said, Tony, the spread to where you can create the capacity for your team to be able to take that extra 15, 20 minutes because you know the revenue that's going to be generated potentially is going to be there. But intentionality, I think, is a huge one, rather than just reaction and transaction.
That's a great point. There's one other thing I think we want to touch on. And Jack, I wonder if you could address this. So agents have been worried for a long time about losing market share to people who are just doing business, online. And right now in the COVID world, we're all online. So, and we talked about geography. So, what are you thinking these days about the local agent's ability to compete with the electronic purveyors of insurance. Is it getting easier, harder, better? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting easier. And I mean, I think as the more access we have to information and you know, the internet's been a really powerful tool in being able to reach out and bond with people who have, you know, we talked about wine, other things. I mean, finding those folks that have those similar, you know, ideas or similar likes or dislikes to you, I mean, can really be a powerful bonding experience. And you can find those people, you know, very easily online. I mean, I mean, when we started doing our Facebook marketing, it's shocking how detailed you can get in going out and finding those people. And, you know, I think when you talk to a lot of people, would you rather do business with somebody who shares your ideals and your values versus somebody who is, you know, local? I think people really want to deal with people that share their ideals and their values. And, you know, those can stretch across all sorts of geography.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Hey, you know, it's time to wrap up. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, whether you joined us on Facebook or YouTube. But we really appreciate you being with us. And, you know, I want to point out that we're planning to do this for a few more weeks. We'd like to, next week, we're going to be talking about commercial insurance, and we've got a slightly different cast of characters to talk about that. But our focus in terms of commercial insurance is what's coming that's really going to impact every agency from the standpoint of commercial insurance. There's some really negative things coming, and I think it's important to know what those are to anticipate them so you can do your best to deal with that. But we really want to do that and then shift gears to talking about what are the opportunities to take advantage of, because there are going to be lots of opportunities to take advantage of. So that's next week, and same time as this session. And the other thing I want to do, if I can figure out how to get my computer to work properly, is to share with you again that we have a lot of resources here on our panel for those of you who would like to touch base. So first of all, on the right-hand side is everyone's contact information, and we'll leave this up for the rest of the show, and you can certainly you know, find us on YouTube or LinkedIn again. But if there's anyone here that you'd like to have more information from or ask a question, please do that, or put it in YouTube or in Facebook, and we'll get back with you. The other thing we want to point out are some websites on the left that you may find useful. We're all members of Strategic Insurance Agents Alliance, which is a national insurance agency organization. We're all over the country as a part of that. And we'd love to talk to anyone out there who is interested in how we might be able to help them either start an insurance agency or grow the one you've already got. Now, we're putting a lot of resources, and 2 or 3 things we mentioned today will be posted to the COVIDproofYouragency.com website. There's already a bunch of resources for agents out there designed to help you grow your business through the COVID crisis. And so we'll be putting more stuff out there. And you can also download COVID Proof Your Agency if you'd like to read the short book that Eric Blue, one of our panelists, and myself and Matt Masiello, the CEO of SIAA, wrote a couple of months ago. It's a short read, but there's a lot of information and a bunch of tools to help you grow your business. And lastly, SIAA had a program called IA Evolve, which was actually last fall, but you can go to iaevolve.com and attend the conference just like it was yesterday. There's tons of information that's really relevant right now about running your agency, moving to digital, all the things that you can do to make money in, or minimize the impact during the COVID crisis. So we encourage you to take a look at all those resources. Again, next week, 3 o'clock, same time on Thursday, we're going to talk about commercial insurance. And then the week after that, I think many of you will be interested in the digital conversation that we're going to have. So, you know, I read a quote on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce website this week that said, one of the results of the COVID-19 crisis is going to be that anything that can be digitized either will be digitized or that business won't stay in business. So what does that mean for the local independent insurance agency? How do you go from wherever you are today to increasingly digital? And how do you make that transition? And what are the things that make sense for you? We're going to have some experts on that, and that's in 2 weeks. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you here next